Right now, as you listen to this, 99% of people are settling for average. They're going through the motions, following the crowd, and wondering why their lives never change. But you're here because you refuse to be part of that statistic. You want to break free from mediocrity and join the elite 1% who actually get what they want from life. Here's the truth that no one wants to tell you. Getting ahead of 99% of people isn't about working harder. It's not about having more talent or better luck. It's about thinking and operating completely differently than everyone else around you. The gap between the successful and the unsuccessful isn't talent or circumstances. It's psychology, habits, and execution. In the next few hours, I'm going to reveal the exact mental frameworks, daily practices, and strategic approaches that separate the top 1% from everyone else. You'll discover why most people stay stuck in cycles of mediocrity while a select few seem to effortlessly rise to the top. More importantly, you'll learn how to reprogram your mind and restructure your life to guarantee your place among the elite. But here's what I need you to understand before we begin. This isn't passive entertainment. This is a blueprint for transformation. Every principle I share has been tested by the most successful people in history and validated by modern psychology and neuroscience. The question isn't whether these strategies work. The question is whether you'll have the discipline to implement them. Chapter 1. The Psychology of the Elite. The first thing you need to understand about getting ahead of 99% of people is that success isn't random. It's not about being in the right place at the right time. And it's definitely not about having some magical talent that others don't possess. Success is psychological. It's about how you think, how you process information, and how you respond to the world around you. The top 1% of performers in any field share certain psychological patterns that are completely different from how average people think. While most people are reactive, emotionally driven, and focused on short-term comfort, the elite have trained their minds to operate from a completely different framework. Let's start with the most fundamental difference. The elite think in systems while average people think in goals. When an average person wants to lose weight, they set a goal to lose 20 pounds. When an elite performer wants to lose weight, they design a system of daily habits that will naturally lead to weight loss. The difference is profound. Goals are about outcomes you can't directly control, while systems are about processes you can control completely. This systems thinking extends to every area of life. Average people say, "I want to be rich," and then wonder why money doesn't appear. Elite performers say, "I will build systems that generate value for others," and money becomes a natural byproduct. Average people say, "I want to be successful," and wait for opportunities. Elite performers say, "I will develop skills that make me valuable," and opportunities start seeking them out. The psychological foundation of elite performance is what I call process orientation. While most people are outcome-dependent, meaning their emotions and actions are determined by external results, the elite are process-dependent. They derive satisfaction and motivation from executing their systems perfectly, regardless of immediate outcomes. This creates a massive psychological advantage. When average people face setbacks, they get discouraged because they're focused on outcomes they can't control. When elite performers face setbacks, they simply refine their process and keep executing. They understand that if they perfect the process, the outcomes will take care of themselves. Another crucial psychological difference is how the elite relationship with discomfort. Average people are constantly seeking comfort, convenience, and ease. They want success without struggle, results without resistance, and growth without growing pains. This comfort-seeking behavior is precisely what keeps them average. The elite have a completely different relationship with discomfort. They understand that discomfort is not something to be avoided, it's something to be leveraged. They know that every significant achievement requires you to become comfortable being uncomfortable. They actively seek out situations that challenge them because they understand that growth only happens at the edge of your comfort zone. This extends to how they handle uncertainty. Average people need certainty before they act. They want guarantees. They want to know exactly how things will turn out, and they want to minimize all risk. This need for certainty paralyzes them because, in reality, nothing worthwhile comes with guarantees. Elite performers have trained themselves to be comfortable with uncertainty. They make decisions with incomplete information because they understand that waiting for perfect information means missing opportunities. They're comfortable taking calculated risks because they know that the biggest risk is not taking any risks at all. The elite also have a different relationship with time. Average people think in terms of days, weeks, and months. They want quick results and immediate gratification. The elite think in terms of years and decades. They're willing to make investments today that won't pay off for years because they understand the power of compound growth. This long-term thinking creates a massive competitive advantage. While everyone else is focused on short-term gains, the elite are building foundations that will generate returns for decades. While others are optimizing for today, the elite are optimizing for the long game. Perhaps most importantly, the elite have developed what psychologists call an internal locus of control. This means they believe their outcomes are primarily determined by their own actions and decisions, not by external circumstances. Average people have an external locus of control. They believe their outcomes are determined by luck, other people, the economy, their background, or circumstances beyond their control. This difference in belief systems creates completely different behaviors. People with an external locus of control become victims. They blame, they make excuses, and they wait for circumstances to change. People with an internal locus of control become agents. They take responsibility, they find solutions, and they create the circumstances they want. The beautiful thing about these psychological patterns is that they can be developed. You're not born with elite psychology. You build it through conscious practice and intentional conditioning. Every time you choose process over outcomes, discomfort over comfort, long-term over short-term, and responsibility over blame, you're rewiring your brain to think like the elite. Chapter 2. Breaking Free from the Mediocrity Trap. Here's an uncomfortable truth that most people refuse to face. Mediocrity is not an accident. It's not something that happens to you. It's something you choose, usually without realizing it. Every day, through thousands of small decisions and mental habits, the vast majority of people actively construct and maintain their own mediocrity. The mediocrity trap is invisible because it doesn't feel like a trap. It feels normal, comfortable, and safe. It's the path of least resistance, the socially acceptable way to live, and the default setting that society programs into us from childhood. But make no mistake, It is a trap, and it's designed to keep you exactly where you are. The first component of the mediocrity trap is what I call consensus thinking. This is the belief that if most people think something or do something, it must be right. Average people look around, see what everyone else is doing, and assume that's the correct approach. They follow the crowd because following the crowd feels safe. But here's what they don't realize. The crowd is always wrong about success. By definition, if everyone is doing something, it cannot be the path to extraordinary results. If the majority approach worked, the majority would be successful. Since the majority is not successful, following the majority approach guarantees mediocre results. Elite performers understand this paradox completely. They actively seek to do the opposite of what most people do. When everyone is buying, they're selling. When everyone is scared, they're investing. When everyone is consuming, they're creating. When everyone is following, they're leading. The second component of the mediocrity trap is instant gratification addiction. Our brains are wired to prefer immediate rewards over delayed rewards, even when the delayed rewards are significantly larger. This biological programming made sense when humans lived in survival mode. But in today's world, it's the fastest path to mediocrity. Average people are constantly trading their future for their present. They choose comfort today over success tomorrow. They choose entertainment over education, consumption over creation, and ease over effort. Each individual choice seems insignificant, but over time, these choices compound into a life of mediocrity. The elite have trained themselves to reverse this pattern. They've developed what psychologists call delayed gratification mastery. They're willing to sacrifice today for a better tomorrow, to work when others are playing, and to invest when others are spending. They understand that today's discomfort is tomorrow's strength. The third component of the mediocrity trap is learned helplessness. This is the psychological condition where people believe they have no control over their circumstances, so they stop trying to change them. They develop a victim mentality where everything that happens to them is someone else's fault. This learned helplessness often starts early in life. People are told they're not smart enough, not talented enough, not connected enough, or not lucky enough to achieve extraordinary success. They internalize these messages and stop believing in their ability to change their circumstances. The elite reject learned helplessness completely. They operate from what I call radical responsibility, the belief that they are 100% responsible for their results, regardless of their starting point or circumstances. They don't waste energy blaming others or making excuses because they understand that blame and excuses don't create solutions. The fourth component of the mediocrity trap is social conditioning. From birth, we're programmed to fit in, to be normal, to avoid standing out too much. We're taught to value security over opportunity, to play it safe, and to follow established paths. This social conditioning creates powerful psychological pressure to conform to average expectations. Breaking free from social conditioning requires what I call social courage, the willingness to disappoint others in order to honor your own potential. This means saying no to social events when you need to work on your goals. It means pursuing opportunities that others don't understand. It means being willing to be misunderstood by people who matter less than your mission. The fifth and most insidious component of the mediocrity trap is comfort zone expansion resistance. Your brain is designed to keep you safe, and it interprets unfamiliar situations as dangerous. Every time you try to grow beyond your current level, your brain activates resistance mechanisms designed to pull you back to familiar territory. This resistance shows up as fear, doubt, procrastination, and self-sabotage. You start making progress toward your goals, and suddenly, you find excuses to stop. You begin building momentum, and then you unconsciously create problems that force you back to your comfort zone. Elite performers understand that this resistance is normal and expected. They don't fight it. They expect it and plan for it. They know that growth requires consistently pushing against this resistance, and they've developed strategies to overcome it systematically. Breaking free from the mediocrity trap requires 3 fundamental shifts. First, you must develop contrarian thinking, the ability to question popular beliefs and make decisions based on logic rather than consensus. Second, you must master delayed gratification, the ability to sacrifice short-term pleasure for long-term success. Third, you must embrace controlled discomfort, the practice of intentionally putting yourself in challenging situations that force growth. The process of breaking free isn't comfortable, and it isn't quick. It requires you to go against your natural programming, social expectations, and immediate desires. But once you understand how the mediocrity trap works, you can never unsee it. You'll start recognizing these patterns everywhere, and you'll develop the awareness necessary to make different choices. Chapter 3. The mental models that create success. Your mind operates through mental models, frameworks that help you interpret information, make decisions, and predict outcomes. Most people inherit their mental models from their family, friends, and society, without ever examining whether these models actually serve them. The elite, however, deliberately study and adopt mental models that give them massive advantages in how they think and operate. The difference between average mental models and elite mental models is the difference between playing checkers and playing chess. Average people use simple, one-dimensional models that focus on immediate, obvious cause and effect relationships. Elite performers use sophisticated, multi-dimensional models that help them see patterns, predict consequences, and identify opportunities that others miss completely. Let's start with one of the most powerful mental models used by the elite: systems thinking. While average people see individual events and isolated problems, systems thinkers see interconnected patterns and root causes. When something goes wrong, average people ask, "What happened?" Systems thinkers ask, "What patterns led to this outcome? And how can we change those patterns?" This mental model creates enormous leverage because it allows you to solve problems at their source rather than just treating symptoms. Instead of constantly fighting fires, you identify what's causing the fires and eliminate those causes. Instead of reacting to problems as they arise, you build systems that prevent problems from occurring in the first place. Another crucial mental model is inversion thinking. Most people focus on what they want to achieve. Elite performers also focus on what they want to avoid. They ask, "What could cause this to fail? And what are all the ways this could go wrong?" This isn't pessimism, it's strategic preparation. Inversion thinking helps you identify potential obstacles before they become actual problems. It forces you to stress test your plans and build redundancy into your systems. While others are surprised by setbacks, you've already anticipated them and prepared solutions in advance. The elite also use probabilistic thinking instead of binary thinking. Average people think in terms of certainties. Something will either work or it won't. People are either good or bad. Opportunities are either perfect or worthless. Elite performers think in terms of probabilities. They assess the likelihood of different outcomes and make decisions based on expected value rather than certainty. This mental model allows them to make better decisions under uncertainty. They don't need perfect information because they're comfortable making high probability bets with asymmetric upside. They understand that being right 60% of the time with good risk management is far better than waiting for 100% certainty and missing opportunities. First principles thinking is another mental model that separates the elite from everyone else. Most people think by analogy. They look at what others have done in similar situations and copy those approaches. First principles thinkers break problems down to their fundamental components and rebuild solutions from the ground up. This approach allows them to find innovative solutions that others miss. While everyone else is following established patterns, first principles thinkers are creating new patterns. They're not constrained by how things have always been done because they understand the underlying principles that determine what actually works. The elite also master optionality thinking. Instead of trying to predict exactly what will happen, they create multiple options and position themselves to benefit from uncertainty. They understand that having more good options is often more valuable than having one perfect plan. This mental model makes them anti-fragile. They don't just survive uncertainty, they thrive on it. While others are paralyzed by unclear futures, elite performers are creating multiple paths to success and positioning themselves to capitalize on whatever happens. Leverage thinking is perhaps the most important mental model for getting ahead of 99% of people. Average people think linearly. If they want twice the results, they assume they need to work twice as hard. Elite performers think exponentially. They look for ways to get exponential results from linear effort. Leverage comes in many forms. Financial leverage, where you use other people's money to amplify your returns. Time leverage, where you use systems and automation to multiply your productivity. Network leverage, where you use relationships to access opportunities and resources. And knowledge leverage, where you develop skills that create disproportionate value. The elite are constantly asking, how can I get more output from the same input? And what would have to be true for this to be 10 times easier? These questions force them to find leverage points that others miss. Another powerful mental model is compound interest thinking. Most people underestimate the power of small, consistent improvements compounded over time. They want dramatic changes and immediate results. Elite performers understand that small advantages, compounded over time, create massive differences in outcomes. They apply this thinking to every area of life, getting 1% better at their craft every day, building relationships consistently over time, investing small amounts regularly, and making tiny improvements to their systems and processes. They know that consistency beats intensity, and small actions compounded over time beat massive actions taken sporadically. Anti-fragility thinking is a mental model that helps the elite benefit from volatility and stress. Instead of trying to avoid all risks and challenges, they build systems that get stronger under pressure. They position themselves so that uncertainty and chaos work in their favor rather than against them. This means building redundancy into their plans, developing multiple income streams, maintaining low fixed costs, and creating optionality in their decisions. When others are being hurt by volatility, anti-fragile systems are getting stronger. The final mental model that creates massive advantages is meta learning. Learning how to learn. While most people focus on accumulating specific knowledge, the elite focus on developing their ability to acquire new knowledge quickly and effectively. They study how memory works, how to read faster, how to practice more effectively, and how to transfer knowledge from one domain to another. This meta skill compounds over time, allowing them to master new areas faster than others can even understand them. These mental models work together to create a completely different operating system for success. While others are using basic mental software that came installed by default, the elite have upgraded to sophisticated thinking tools that give them massive advantages in every situation. Chapter 4. Building unshakable confidence and self-belief. Confidence is not what most people think it is. It's not an innate personality trait that some people are born with and others aren't. It's not about feeling good all the time or never experiencing doubt. Real confidence, the kind that drives extraordinary achievement, is a skill that can be developed systematically through specific practices and mindset shifts. The elite understand that confidence is not about feelings, it's about competence. While average people try to feel confident, elite performers focus on becoming confident through building genuine competence and proving to themselves that they can handle whatever challenges arise. True confidence comes from what I call evidence-based self-belief. This means building a track record of keeping promises to yourself, handling difficult situations successfully, and developing skills that create real value. Every time you do something difficult, every time you keep a commitment to yourself, and every time you solve a problem, you're depositing evidence into your confidence account. Most people have it backwards. They wait to feel confident before they take action. They want to feel ready before they start, certain before they commit, and comfortable before they stretch. This approach keeps them stuck because confidence doesn't create action. Action creates confidence. Elite performers understand that confidence is built through what psychologists call mastery experiences. These are situations where you successfully handle challenges, overcome obstacles, and achieve outcomes that initially seemed difficult or impossible. Each mastery experience builds your belief in your ability to handle future challenges. The key is to systematically create mastery experiences by taking on progressively bigger challenges. Start with something just outside your comfort zone, but achievable with effort. Master that level, then move to the next level. This creates an upward spiral where each success builds confidence for the next challenge. But here's what most confidence advice gets wrong. Real confidence isn't about positive thinking or affirmations. It's about developing what I call problem-solving confidence. The deep belief that no matter what happens, you'll figure out how to handle it. This type of confidence doesn't come from avoiding problems, it comes from successfully solving them. Elite performers actively seek out problems to solve because they know that every problem they solve increases their confidence in their ability to handle future problems. They don't avoid challenges, they collect them. They don't fear uncertainty. They see it as an opportunity to build evidence of their resourcefulness. Another crucial element of unshakable confidence is understanding the difference between confidence and arrogance. Confidence is based on competence and evidence. Arrogance is based on ego and insecurity. Confident people know what they can do because they've done it. Arrogant people pretend to know what they can do to hide their insecurities. Real confidence is quiet and calm. It doesn't need to prove itself constantly because it's based on genuine capability. Confident people are also humble because they understand how much they still don't know. They're secure enough to admit mistakes, ask for help, and continuously learn. The elite also develop what I call process confidence versus outcome confidence. Most people base their confidence on achieving specific outcomes, making a certain amount of money, reaching a particular position, or getting specific results. This is fragile because outcomes depend on many factors outside your control. Process confidence is based on your ability to execute the right actions consistently, regardless of immediate outcomes. When you have process confidence, you know that if you keep executing correctly, good outcomes will eventually follow. This type of confidence is unshakable because it's based on things you can completely control. Building unshakable confidence also requires developing what I call failure immunity. Most people's confidence is destroyed by failure because they interpret failure as evidence that they're not capable. Elite performers interpret failure as evidence that they're pushing their limits and learning valuable lessons. They understand that failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of success. Every failure teaches them something important about what doesn't work, bringing them closer to what does work. They don't fear failure because they know it's temporary and educational. This mindset shift requires redefining what failure means. Instead of seeing failure as evidence of inadequacy, see it as evidence of effort. Instead of seeing failure as permanent, see it as temporary feedback. Instead of seeing failure as personal, see it as part of the learning process. The elite also build confidence through what I call competence stacking. Instead of trying to be the best in the world at one thing, they become very good at several complementary skills. This creates a unique combination of capabilities that's extremely valuable and hard to replicate. For example, someone might become good at writing, good at understanding psychology, and good at marketing. Individually, these skills are valuable but not extraordinary. Combined, they create the ability to influence people through written content in ways that very few people can match. Competence stacking builds confidence because it makes you valuable in multiple ways. If one area doesn't work out, you have others to fall back on. It also creates unique opportunities because you can see connections and possibilities that specialists in individual areas might miss. Another key to unshakable confidence is developing present moment awareness. Anxiety and insecurity always come from thinking about future threats or past failures. Confidence exists in the present moment, where you can take action and influence outcomes. Elite performers train themselves to stay focused on what they can control right now. They don't waste mental energy worrying about things that might happen or dwelling on things that already happened. They channel all their energy into taking the best possible action in the current moment. This present moment focus creates what athletes call flow state, a condition of complete confidence and peak performance. When you're fully present and focused on the task at hand, doubt disappears because there's no mental space for it. Finally, unshakable confidence requires developing what I call identity-based confidence. This means shifting from "I am someone trying to become successful" to "I am someone who does whatever it takes to succeed." Your identity drives your actions, and your actions reinforce your identity. When your identity is aligned with your goals, confidence becomes automatic. You don't have to motivate yourself to act like a successful person. You act like a successful person because that's who you are. This creates consistency and sustainability that outcome-based motivation can never match. Building unshakable confidence is not about eliminating doubt or fear. It's about acting with conviction despite doubt and fear. It's about building so much evidence of your capability that no external circumstance can shake your belief in your ability to handle whatever comes next. Chapter 5. The Psychology of Relentless Execution. Execution is where dreams either become reality or die a slow death. Most people are excellent at planning, dreaming, and talking about what they want to achieve. Very few people are excellent at the unglamorous daily work of turning plans into results. This is why there's such a massive gap between the top 1% and everyone else. It's not about having better ideas. It's about better execution. The psychology of elite execution is fundamentally different from how average people approach action. Most people rely on motivation, inspiration, and feeling ready before they act. Elite performers understand that these feelings are unreliable and temporary. Instead, they build what I call execution systems that guarantee action regardless of how they feel. The first principle of relentless execution is understanding that motivation is not a strategy. Motivation is an emotion, and emotions are temporary and unpredictable. Waiting for motivation to take action is like waiting for the weather to be perfect before you leave your house. You'll spend most of your time waiting and very little time moving. Elite performers replace motivation with something far more reliable: systems and habits. They create structured routines that automate the most important actions, removing the need to make decisions or rely on willpower. When execution becomes automatic, it no longer depends on how you feel in the moment. This is why the most successful people often seem to have superhuman discipline. They don't actually have more willpower than others. They've just designed their lives so that the right actions happen automatically. They've removed friction from good behaviors and added friction to bad behaviors. The second principle is what I call minimum viable progress. Most people sabotage their execution by setting standards that are impossible to maintain consistently. They commit to working out for 2 hours every day, then quit completely when they miss a day. They promise to wake up at 5 a.m. every morning, then abandon the entire routine after sleeping in once. Elite performers understand that consistency beats intensity. They focus on the smallest possible action they can take every single day, regardless of circumstances. If their normal workout is 1 hour, their minimum viable progress might be 5 minutes. If their normal writing goal is 1,000 words, their minimum might be 100 words. This approach works because it maintains momentum and preserves the identity of someone who executes. Even on your worst days, you're still taking action toward your goals. These small actions compound over time and create massive results. The third principle is implementation intention. Having specific plans for when, where, and how you'll execute. Most people have vague intentions like, I'll work on my business, or I'll exercise more. Elite performers have precise implementation intentions like, I'll work on my business from 6 to 8 a.m. in my home office, or I'll do 20 push-ups immediately after I brush my teeth. Research shows that implementation intentions increase follow-through by 200 to 300% because they eliminate the decision-making friction that kills execution. When you've already decided exactly when and how you'll act, there's no mental energy wasted on figuring out what to do next. The fourth principle is understanding and leveraging what psychologists call the fresh start effect. People are much more likely to take action and maintain consistency after temporal landmarks like Monday, the first of the month, their birthday, or New Year's. Elite performers don't wait for these natural fresh starts. They create artificial ones. They use techniques like Monday resets, where they recommit to their systems every week. Daily restarts, where they begin each day with clear intentions regardless of what happened yesterday. And project sprints, where they commit to intense execution for specific time periods. This psychological principle works because fresh starts give you a sense of leaving past failures behind and starting with a clean slate. Instead of carrying the weight of previous inconsistency, you feel like you're beginning anew with unlimited potential. The fifth principle is obstacle anticipation. Most people are surprised by resistance and setbacks, which derails their execution. Elite performers spend time identifying everything that could go wrong and create specific plans for handling each obstacle. They ask questions like, what will I do if I don't feel like working tomorrow? How will I handle it if this project takes longer than expected? What's my plan if I face unexpected resistance? By anticipating obstacles, they're prepared with solutions instead of being surprised by problems. This preparation eliminates what psychologists call decision fatigue. When obstacles arise, they don't have to waste mental energy figuring out how to respond. They simply execute their predetermined plan. This keeps momentum going when others get stuck. The sixth principle is progress tracking and feedback loops. Elite performers are obsessed with measuring their execution because they understand that what gets measured gets managed. They track not just outcomes but also the specific actions that lead to outcomes. They create feedback loops that give them immediate information about whether their execution is on track. This might be daily check-ins, weekly reviews, or real-time dashboards that show their progress. The faster they get feedback, the faster they can adjust and improve. This measurement focus also creates what psychologists call the progress principle. People are most motivated when they can see clear evidence that they're making progress toward meaningful goals. By tracking execution, they create visible evidence of their forward movement. The seventh principle is energy management over time management. Most people focus on managing their time, but elite performers focus on managing their energy. They understand that not all hours are created equal. The quality of your execution depends heavily on your physical and mental state. They identify when they have the most energy and schedule their most important work during those times. They protect their peak energy periods fiercely and use lower energy times for less demanding tasks. They also invest heavily in activities that increase their overall energy levels: exercise, nutrition, sleep, and stress management. The final principle of relentless execution is identity-based action. Most people try to change their behavior without changing their identity. They want to lose weight while still seeing themselves as someone who struggles with food. They want to build a business while still seeing themselves as an employee. Elite performers understand that sustainable execution requires identity change. They don't just act like successful people. They become successful people at the identity level. This creates internal alignment where their actions naturally match their self-concept, making execution feel effortless rather than forced. When your identity supports your goals, execution becomes automatic. You don't have to force yourself to act like someone who's disciplined, focused, and committed. You act that way because that's who you are. This is the ultimate key to relentless execution, becoming the type of person who naturally does the things that create extraordinary results. Chapter 6. The Science of Habit Formation and Behavioral Change. Your life is essentially the sum of your habits. Every outcome you're experiencing right now is the direct result of the systems and patterns you've been running consistently over time. The elite understand this truth at a profound level, which is why they're obsessed with designing and optimizing their habits rather than just setting goals and hoping for the best. Here's what most people get wrong about habits. They think habits are about willpower and motivation. They believe that if they just try harder or want something badly enough, they can force themselves to change. This approach fails because it's fighting against how the brain actually works. Your brain is designed to automate behaviors to conserve energy. Once a behavior becomes automatic, it no longer requires conscious decision-making or willpower. This is why you can drive to work without thinking about it, brush your teeth without a detailed plan, or check your phone without consciously deciding to do so. Your brain has automated these behaviors to free up mental resources for other tasks. The problem is that your brain can't distinguish between good habits and bad habits. It will automate whatever you repeat consistently, regardless of whether it serves your long-term goals. This is why people can develop habits of procrastination, negative thinking, or unhealthy eating just as easily as habits of exercise, learning, or productivity. Elite performers understand the neuroscience of habit formation and use it to their advantage. They know that habits are formed through a three-part loop: cue, routine, and reward. The cue triggers the behavior. The routine is the behavior itself, and the reward reinforces the behavior and makes it more likely to happen again. To build a new habit, you need to identify the right cue, design the right routine, and ensure there's a satisfying reward. To break a bad habit, you need to identify the cue that triggers it, replace the routine with something better, and make sure the new routine provides a similar reward. But here's where most people fail. They try to change too many habits at once. They want to wake up early, exercise daily, eat healthy, read more, and meditate, all starting Monday. This approach overwhelms your willpower and guarantees failure because your brain can only handle forming one new habit at a time. Elite performers use what I call sequential habit stacking. They focus on one habit until it becomes automatic. Then add the next habit. This approach works because once a habit is automatic, it no longer requires willpower, freeing up mental resources to work on the next habit. The key to successful habit formation is starting incredibly small. Most people set ambitious habit goals like, I'll exercise for 1 hour every day, or I'll read for 30 minutes every morning. These goals feel motivating, but they're too big to maintain consistently. Elite performers start with what behavior scientist B.J. Fogg quotes, tiny habits. Instead of exercising for an hour, they commit to putting on their workout clothes. Instead of reading for 30 minutes, they commit to reading 1 page. These tiny habits are so small that they're impossible to fail at, which builds momentum and confidence. Once the tiny habit is established, you can gradually increase the behavior. The person who commits to putting on workout clothes will naturally start exercising once they're dressed. The person who reads 1 page will often read more because they're already engaged. The key is building the habit first, then expanding it. Another crucial element of habit formation is what psychologists call environmental design. Your environment shapes your behavior more than your willpower does. If you want to eat healthier, the most effective strategy isn't to rely on willpower when you're hungry. It's to remove junk food from your environment and fill it with healthy options. Elite performers are obsessed with designing their environment to make good habits easier and bad habits harder. They place their workout clothes next to their bed so they see them first thing in the morning. They put their phone in another room to avoid mindless scrolling. They arrange their workspace to minimize distractions and maximize focus. This environmental approach works because it reduces what psychologists call decision fatigue. Every decision you make throughout the day depletes your mental energy. By designing your environment to automate good choices, you preserve your decision-making energy for more important matters. The elite also understand the power of what I call habit stacking. This means attaching new habits to existing habits that are already well established. Instead of trying to remember to do something new at a random time, you link it to something you already do automatically. For example, after I brush my teeth, I will do 10 push-ups. Or, after I sit down at my desk, I will write down my 3 priorities for the day. The existing habit serves as a reliable cue for the new habit, making it much more likely to stick. Perhaps most importantly, elite performers understand that identity drives habits more than habits drive identity. Most people try to change their habits while keeping the same self-image. They want to exercise regularly while still seeing themselves as someone who doesn't like fitness. They want to wake up early while still identifying as a night person. This approach creates internal conflict because your actions need to be consistent with your identity. If there's a mismatch, your identity usually wins. This is why most behavior change fails. People are trying to act in ways that contradict who they believe they are. The solution is to start with identity change. Instead of saying, I want to exercise more, say, I am someone who prioritizes my health. Instead of, I want to wake up early, say, I am a morning person. When your identity aligns with your desired behaviors, those behaviors become natural expressions of who you are. Elite performers also use what I call progressive habit complexity. They start with simple habits and gradually make them more sophisticated. Someone building a reading habit might start with reading 1 page, progress to reading for 10 minutes, then advance to reading specific types of books, taking notes, and implementing what they learn. This progression keeps the habit interesting and challenging while building on the foundation of consistency. It prevents boredom while ensuring that the core behavior remains automatic. The final key to mastering habits is understanding that setbacks are part of the process, not signs of failure. Everyone breaks their habits occasionally. The difference is how quickly they get back on track. Average people see one missed day as evidence that they've failed and use it as an excuse to quit completely. Elite performers expect setbacks and have predetermined plans for getting back on track. They follow what I call the never miss twice rule. If they miss one day, they make absolutely sure they don't miss the next day. This prevents one setback from becoming a pattern of failure. By mastering the science of habit formation, you can literally redesign your life from the ground up. Instead of relying on motivation and willpower, you can create systems that automatically generate the behaviors that lead to extraordinary results. Chapter 7. The Art of Accelerated Learning and Skill Mastery. In today's rapidly changing world, your ability to learn new skills quickly isn't just an advantage. It's essential for survival. The half-life of skills is shrinking dramatically. What took decades to become obsolete now becomes outdated in years or even months. The elite understand that continuous learning isn't optional. It's the price of staying relevant. But here's where most people get learning completely wrong. They approach it like they're still in school. They try to absorb information passively. They focus on consuming rather than applying. And they measure learning by how much information they can retain rather than how much value they can create. Elite performers have a completely different approach to learning. They don't learn for the sake of learning. They learn for the sake of application. Every piece of information they absorb is evaluated through the lens of, how can I use this to create better results? This application-focused approach makes their learning exponentially more effective. The first principle of accelerated learning is what I call just-in-time learning. Instead of trying to learn everything about a subject before they start, elite performers learn what they need to know exactly when they need to know it. They identify the minimum viable knowledge required to begin, start applying immediately, and fill in gaps as they encounter them. This approach works because application creates context, and context makes learning stick. When you're actually using information to solve real problems, your brain creates stronger neural pathways because it understands that this information is important and relevant. Most people do the opposite. They try to learn everything before they start anything. They read every book, take every course, and attend every seminar before they feel ready to begin. This approach fails because information without application is quickly forgotten, and learning without context lacks meaning. The second principle is learning from outcomes rather than just information. Most people learn by consuming information, reading books, watching videos, listening to podcasts. Elite performers learn primarily by studying outcomes, examining what actually works in the real world, and reverse engineering the principles behind those results. They study successful people in their field and identify the specific actions, decisions, and strategies that led to success. They also study failures to understand what doesn't work and why. This outcome-based learning is far more practical and actionable than theoretical knowledge. The third principle is what I call meta-learning, learning how to learn. While most people focus on accumulating specific knowledge, elite performers focus on developing their learning capabilities. They study memory techniques, reading strategies, note-taking systems, and practice methods that allow them to acquire new skills faster. This investment in learning how to learn pays compound returns over time. Someone who can learn twice as fast will accumulate exponentially more knowledge and skills over the course of their career. The time invested in developing meta-learning skills is among the highest leverage activities you can pursue. Elite performers also understand the power of what psychologists call deliberate practice. Most people practice by simply repeating activities, hoping that repetition alone will lead to improvement. Deliberate practice is completely different. It's focused, intentional practice designed to address specific weaknesses and push past current limitations. Deliberate practice requires identifying your specific areas of weakness, designing exercises that target those weaknesses, practicing at the edge of your current ability, and getting immediate feedback on your performance. It's uncomfortable and mentally demanding, which is why most people avoid it and plateau at average levels of performance. But deliberate practice is how you develop expertise faster than others who have been doing something longer. Time doesn't create mastery. The quality of practice creates mastery. Someone who practices deliberately for 1 year can surpass someone who practices casually for 5 years. Another key to accelerated learning is understanding the difference between learning and performing. Most people mix these two modes, which makes both less effective. Learning mode is about experimentation, making mistakes, and pushing boundaries. Performing mode is about executing skills you've already developed. Elite performers separate these modes clearly. When they're learning, they embrace mistakes and focus on improvement rather than results. When they're performing, they use their established skills to create value and achieve outcomes. This separation allows them to maximize both learning and performance. The elite also leverage what I call learning leverage, getting maximum learning from minimum time investment. They do this through several strategies. Learning from mentors who can compress years of experience into hours of conversation, studying case studies that reveal patterns across multiple situations, and joining communities where they can learn from the collective experience of others. They also use technology to accelerate learning. This includes speed reading techniques, spaced repetition systems for memory, audio content for learning during commute time, and online courses that allow them to learn from world-class experts regardless of location. Perhaps most importantly, elite performers understand that mastery isn't about perfection. It's about continuous improvement. They don't wait until they're experts before they start creating value. They begin applying what they learn immediately, even if their skills are still developing. This creates what I call a learning spiral. They apply basic skills to create value, which gives them experience and feedback, which improves their skills, which allows them to create more value, which gives them more experience, and so on. This spiral accelerates their development far beyond what traditional learning approaches can achieve. The elite also practice what I call skill stacking, developing complementary skills that multiply each other's value. Instead of trying to become the world's best at one thing, they become very good at several things that work together synergistically. For example, someone might develop skills in writing, psychology, and marketing. Individually, these are valuable skills. Combined, they create the ability to influence people through written content in ways that specialists in any individual area cannot match. Finally, elite performers understand that the goal of learning isn't to accumulate credentials or impress others. It's to develop capabilities that create real value. They measure their learning success not by how much they know, but by how much they can do with what they know. This practical focus keeps their learning grounded in reality and ensures that every hour invested in learning translates into enhanced ability to create results. They don't learn to learn, they learn to do, and they do to learn. Chapter 8. The Hidden Power of Strategic Relationships and Networking. Success is not a solo journey. Behind every person who achieves extraordinary results, you'll find a network of relationships that provided opportunities, guidance, resources, and support that would have been impossible to access alone. The elite understand this truth deeply, which is why they invest as much energy in building relationships as they do in building skills. But here's what most people get wrong about networking. They approach it as a transaction. They meet people only when they need something. They focus on what they can get rather than what they can give. And they treat relationships as a means to an end rather than valuable in themselves. This transactional approach fails because it's fundamentally selfish and short-sighted. People can sense when they're being used, and they naturally resist relationships that feel extractive. More importantly, this approach misses the exponential value that comes from genuine, long-term relationships built on mutual benefit. Elite performers understand that relationships are not about networking events and business cards. They're about creating genuine value for others and building authentic connections over time. They focus on giving before receiving, helping before asking, and contributing before extracting. The first principle of strategic relationship building is what I call value first networking. Instead of approaching relationships with the question, "What can this person do for me?" elite performers ask, "What can I do for this person?" They look for ways to solve problems, make connections, share resources, or provide insights that benefit others. This approach works because it's based on the fundamental psychological principle of reciprocity. When you provide value to someone without expecting anything in return, they naturally feel obligated to help you when they can. But more importantly, they remember you as someone who helps rather than someone who takes. The second principle is understanding that relationships compound over time. Most people give up on relationship building because they don't see immediate returns. They attend a few networking events, don't get any obvious benefits, and conclude that networking doesn't work. Elite performers understand that relationship value compounds exponentially over time. A casual conversation today might lead to an introduction next month that creates an opportunity next year that changes your entire career trajectory. The value of relationships is often invisible until it suddenly becomes transformational. This long-term perspective changes how they approach every interaction. They don't evaluate relationships based on immediate utility. They evaluate them based on potential long-term value. They understand that today's peer might be tomorrow's CEO. Today's junior employee might be tomorrow's decision-maker, and today's introduction might be tomorrow's opportunity. The third principle is what I call relationship diversity. Most people build networks that look exactly like themselves. Same industry, same level, same background, same perspectives. This creates an echo chamber that limits opportunities and insights. Elite performers intentionally build diverse networks that span different industries, levels of experience, geographical locations, and areas of expertise. This diversity creates what sociologists call structural holes, unique positions in networks that provide access to non-redundant information and opportunities. When you're connected to diverse groups that aren't connected to each other, you become a bridge that can see opportunities and make connections that others miss. You become valuable not just for what you know, but for who you know and how you can connect different parts of your network. The fourth principle is understanding the power of weak ties. Most people focus on building strong relationships with people they interact with frequently. While these relationships are important, research shows that opportunities often come through weak ties, people you know casually but don't interact with regularly. Weak ties are valuable because they exist in different social and professional circles than your close network. They have access to different information, opportunities, and resources. The person who changes your life might be someone you met briefly at a conference 3 years ago and stayed loosely connected with through social media. This insight changes how you approach casual encounters. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to plant seeds that might grow into valuable relationships. Every introduction becomes a potential bridge to new opportunities. Every interaction becomes an investment in your long-term relationship portfolio. Elite performers also understand the importance of what I call relationship maintenance. Building relationships is only half the battle. Maintaining them is equally important. Most people are excellent at making initial connections but terrible at staying in touch over time. The elite have systems for relationship maintenance. They use CRM tools to track important details about people in their network. They set reminders to reach out periodically. They share relevant articles, make introductions, and look for ways to add value on an ongoing basis. They understand that relationships require ongoing investment to remain valuable. Another crucial element is what I call strategic positioning within networks. Elite performers don't just build relationships randomly. They think strategically about their position within networks and how they can become more central and valuable to others. They identify key connectors in their industry and build relationships with them. They position themselves as valuable resources that others want to know. They become known for specific expertise or connections that make them go-to people for certain types of opportunities or information. This strategic positioning makes them magnetic to opportunities. Instead of chasing opportunities start chasing them because they've positioned themselves as valuable nodes within their network. The elite also understand the power of giving without asking. They regularly provide value to their network without expecting anything specific in return. They make introductions between people in their network, share valuable information, offer help with projects, and provide resources that benefit others. This generous approach creates what I call relationship capital, a bank account of goodwill that you can draw on when you need help. People who have benefited from your generosity are naturally inclined to help you when opportunities arise. Perhaps most importantly, elite performers understand that the best relationships are built on genuine mutual interest and respect, not just professional utility. They look for people they actually enjoy spending time with, who share similar values, and who they can learn from and contribute to on a personal level. These genuine relationships create what sociologists call social capital, resources that come from being part of a network of mutual acquaintance and recognition. Social capital opens doors that credentials alone cannot open and creates opportunities that skills alone cannot access. The compound effect of strategic relationship building cannot be overstated. Over time, a well-cultivated network becomes an exponential multiplier for every other investment you make in yourself. Your skills become more valuable because you have relationships that can amplify them. Your opportunities increase because you have relationships that can create them. Your learning accelerates because you have relationships that can teach you. Chapter 9. Emotional Mastery and Mental Resilience. Your emotions are not something that happen to you. They're something you can learn to manage, direct, and leverage for better outcomes. The elite understand this fundamental truth about human psychology, which is why they invest heavily in developing emotional intelligence and mental resilience rather than just hoping they'll feel motivated when it matters most. Most people are completely at the mercy of their emotions. When they feel good, they perform well. When they feel bad, they perform poorly. When they're motivated, they take action. When they're not motivated, they procrastinate. This emotional dependency creates massive inconsistency in their results and limits their potential severely. Elite performers operate from what I call emotional independence. They understand that emotions are information, not instructions. They feel their emotions fully but don't let those emotions dictate their actions. They can perform at high levels regardless of their emotional state because they've developed the ability to act based on their commitments rather than their feelings. The first principle of emotional mastery is understanding that emotions are created by thoughts, not circumstances. Most people believe that external events directly cause their emotional responses. They think, I feel angry because of what he said, or I feel depressed because of what happened. This belief makes them victims of their circumstances because it suggests they have no control over how they feel. Elite performers understand that circumstances are neutral. It's their interpretation of circumstances that creates emotional responses. The same event can create completely different emotions in different people because they interpret it differently. This insight is liberating because it means you can change your emotional responses by changing your thoughts. Instead of being a victim of circumstances, you become the director of your emotional experience. You can't always control what happens to you, but you can always control what you make it mean. The second principle is what psychologists call emotional granularity, the ability to identify and distinguish between different emotional states with precision. Most people have a very limited emotional vocabulary. They know good and bad, happy and sad, but they can't distinguish between frustration and disappointment, excitement and anxiety, or confidence and arrogance. This emotional precision is crucial because different emotions require different responses. The strategy for dealing with anxiety is different from the strategy for dealing with anger. The approach to frustration is different from the approach to disappointment. Without emotional granularity, you're using generic strategies for specific problems. Elite performers develop sophisticated emotional awareness. They can identify exactly what they're feeling, understand what triggered that emotion, and choose the most effective response. This emotional precision allows them to navigate complex situations with clarity rather than being overwhelmed by undefined feelings. The third principle is learning to separate primary emotions from secondary emotions. Primary emotions are your immediate, instinctive responses to situations. Secondary emotions are your emotional reactions to your primary emotions. For example, you might feel fear about giving a presentation, primary emotion, and then feel ashamed about feeling afraid, secondary emotion. Secondary emotions are often more destructive than primary emotions because they create emotional spirals. You feel bad about feeling bad, which makes you feel worse, which makes you feel bad about feeling worse, and so on. Elite performers learn to accept their primary emotions without judgment while avoiding secondary emotional reactions. The fourth principle is understanding the difference between emotional suppression and emotional regulation. Emotional suppression means trying to avoid or eliminate emotions entirely. This approach fails because emotions are natural and necessary. They provide important information about your environment and internal state. Emotional regulation means feeling emotions fully while choosing how to respond to them. You don't suppress the emotion, you experience it, understand its message, and then decide how to act based on your goals rather than your feelings. This approach honors your emotional experience while maintaining behavioral control. Elite performers also master what I call emotional reframing. This means changing the meaning you attach to emotional experiences to change their impact on your performance. Instead of seeing nervousness as a sign of weakness, they reframe it as excitement and preparation. Instead of seeing failure as evidence of inadequacy, they reframe it as valuable feedback and learning opportunities. This reframing ability allows them to extract value from difficult emotions rather than being derailed by them. They understand that emotions like fear, anger, and frustration often contain important information about what needs to change or what requires attention. Another crucial skill is developing what psychologists call distress tolerance, the ability to survive crisis situations without making them worse through impulsive actions. Most people's biggest mistakes happen when they're emotionally activated. They send angry emails, make hasty decisions, or quit important projects because they can't tolerate temporary discomfort. Elite performers train themselves to pause between emotional stimulus and response. They create space between feeling and action, which allows them to choose their response rather than react automatically. This pause prevents them from making decisions they'll regret and allows them to respond strategically even in difficult situations. The elite also understand the importance of what I call emotional recovery. They know that high performance requires managing their emotional energy just like their physical energy. They have strategies for quickly returning to optimal emotional states after setbacks, conflicts, or disappointments. This might include meditation practices, physical exercise, journaling, talking to trusted advisors, or engaging in activities that restore their emotional equilibrium. They don't just endure difficult emotions, they have systematic approaches for processing them and returning to peak performance states. Perhaps most importantly, elite performers develop what I call anti-fragile emotions. Instead of trying to avoid all emotional difficulty, they build emotional systems that get stronger under stress. They use challenges as opportunities to develop greater emotional capacity, setbacks as chances to build resilience, and conflicts as ways to improve their emotional intelligence. This anti-fragile approach means they don't just survive emotional challenges, they benefit from them. Every difficult situation becomes training that prepares them for even bigger challenges. They develop emotional strength through emotional stress, just like muscles develop physical strength through physical stress. The compound effect of emotional mastery cannot be overstated. When you can maintain peak performance regardless of your emotional state, when you can extract value from difficult emotions, and when you can recover quickly from setbacks, you gain massive advantages over people who are at the mercy of their feelings. Emotional mastery allows you to be consistent when others are inconsistent, calm when others are reactive, and strategic when others are impulsive. It's not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming emotionally intelligent enough to leverage your emotions for better results, rather than being limited by them. Chapter 10. Advanced Decision Making and Strategic Thinking. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of your decisions. Every outcome you're experiencing right now is the result of countless decisions you've made over time. The elite understand this truth profoundly, which is why they invest heavily in developing superior decision-making frameworks rather than relying on intuition, emotion, or conventional wisdom. Most people make decisions reactively, emotionally, and without systematic frameworks. They decide based on how they feel in the moment, what seems obvious or popular, or what requires the least effort. This approach leads to decisions that feel good short-term but create poor results long-term. Elite performers understand that good decision-making is a skill that can be developed through study, practice, and systematic frameworks. They don't trust their first instinct or immediate emotional response. Instead, they use proven mental models and decision-making processes that consistently lead to better outcomes. The first principle of advanced decision-making is understanding the difference between reversible and irreversible decisions. Amazon's Jeff Bezos calls these one-way door and two-way door decisions. Two-way door decisions can be changed easily if they don't work out. One-way door decisions are difficult or impossible to reverse. Most people treat all decisions the same way, spending enormous amounts of time and energy on reversible decisions while rushing through irreversible ones. Elite performers do the opposite. They make reversible decisions quickly and gather information through action while spending significant time and analysis on irreversible decisions that will have long-term consequences. This framework prevents decision paralysis on low-stakes choices while ensuring thorough analysis on high-stakes choices. It also allows for faster learning because you're constantly gathering real-world feedback on reversible decisions rather than analyzing them theoretically. The second principle is what I call probabilistic thinking. Most people think in terms of certainties. Something will either work or it won't, succeed or fail, be good or bad. Elite performers think in terms of probabilities. They assess the likelihood of different outcomes and make decisions based on expected value rather than certainty. This probabilistic approach allows them to make better decisions under uncertainty. They don't need perfect information because they're comfortable making decisions when they have a reasonable probability of success and favorable risk-reward ratios. They also understand that being wrong occasionally is part of making good decisions. If you're right 100% of the time, you're probably not taking enough risks or considering enough options. The goal isn't to never be wrong. It's to be wrong less often and with smaller consequences than others. The third principle is inversion thinking, considering not just what you want to achieve, but what you want to avoid. Most people only think about positive outcomes when making decisions. Elite performers also consider negative outcomes and work backward from failure to understand what could go wrong. This approach helps them identify potential problems before they become actual problems. It forces them to stress test their decisions and build in safeguards against foreseeable risks. By thinking about failure modes, they can design decisions that are more robust and resilient. The fourth principle is understanding and leveraging optionality. Instead of trying to predict exactly what will happen, elite performers make decisions that create multiple good options for the future. They position themselves to benefit from uncertainty rather than being hurt by it. This might mean choosing career paths that develop transferable skills, making investments that have limited downside but unlimited upside, or building relationships that could lead to various opportunities. The goal is to increase your range of good choices rather than betting everything on one specific outcome. Elite performers also master what I call decision timing. They understand that when you make a decision is often as important as what decision you make. They consider market conditions, personal circumstances, competitive dynamics, and other timing factors that could affect the outcome of their decisions. They also understand the power of what Charlie Munger calls sit on your ass investing. Sometimes the best decision is to not make a decision. They resist the pressure to act when action isn't required and wait for genuinely compelling opportunities rather than forcing suboptimal choices. Another crucial element is developing what psychologists call metacognitive awareness, thinking about thinking. Elite performers regularly examine their own decision-making processes to identify biases, errors, and improvement opportunities. They keep decision journals where they record their reasoning, predictions, and confidence levels for important decisions. Later, they review these journals to see where they were right, where they were wrong, and what patterns emerge in their thinking. This feedback loop continuously improves their decision-making capabilities. The elite also understand the importance of getting input from others while maintaining decision-making authority. They actively seek out diverse perspectives, devil's advocates, and expert opinions to challenge their thinking and identify blind spots. But they don't make decisions by committee or let others' opinions override their analysis. They gather information from others while maintaining responsibility for the final decision. This approach combines the benefits of collective intelligence with the clarity of individual accountability. Perhaps most importantly, elite performers understand that perfect decisions don't exist. There are always trade-offs, unknowns, and unintended consequences. The goal isn't to make perfect decisions. It's to make decisions that are good enough to move forward and then adapt based on new information. This mindset prevents decision paralysis and perfectionism while ensuring continuous progress. They understand that making a pretty good decision quickly is usually better than making a perfect decision slowly, especially in rapidly changing environments. They also practice what I call decision velocity, maintaining a rapid pace of decision-making on appropriate choices. They understand that in many situations, the speed of decision-making is more important than the perfection of decision-making. This rapid decision-making capability comes from having clear values, established frameworks, and confidence in their ability to adapt if decisions don't work out as planned. They can move quickly, because they're not paralyzed by uncertainty or perfectionism. The compound effect of superior decision-making creates exponential advantages over time. Better decisions lead to better outcomes, which create more resources and opportunities, which enable even better decisions. Over time, this creates a massive gap between those who develop decision-making skills and those who rely on luck, emotion, or conventional wisdom. Mastering decision-making is perhaps the highest leverage skill you can develop because it affects every other area of your life. Better decisions lead to better relationships, better career moves, better investments, better health choices, and better use of time and energy. It's the meta skill that multiplies the value of all your other capabilities. Chapter 11. Time, Mastery, and Peak Productivity Systems. Time is the only resource you cannot create more of, which makes it infinitely more valuable than money, connections, or any other asset. The elite understand this truth at a cellular level, which is why they're obsessed with time optimization rather than just time management. They don't just manage their time, they architect it to create maximum leverage and compound returns. Most people have a fundamentally broken relationship with time. They think about time as something that happens to them, rather than something they can design and control. They fill their days with busy work that feels productive, but doesn't actually move them toward their goals. They confuse motion with progress and activity with achievement. Elite performers understand that not all time is created equal. An hour spent on high-leverage activities can create more value than weeks spent on low-leverage activities. They focus obsessively on what I call time leverage, identifying the activities that create disproportionate returns and eliminating or delegating everything else. The first principle of time mastery is understanding the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency is doing things right, completing tasks quickly and with minimal waste. Effectiveness is doing the right things, focusing on activities that actually matter for your goals. Most people optimize for efficiency when they should be optimizing for effectiveness. They become incredibly good at doing things that don't matter. They organize their email perfectly, attend every meeting, and complete every task on their list. But they never ask whether these activities are actually moving them toward their objectives. Elite performers start with effectiveness and then add efficiency. They first identify the activities that will create the biggest impact, then figure out how to do those activities as efficiently as possible. They would rather do one important thing poorly than 10 unimportant things perfectly. The second principle is what I call energy-based scheduling. Most people schedule based on time availability. They put tasks wherever they have open slots in their calendar. Elite performers schedule based on energy availability. They match their most important work to their peak energy periods. They understand that their mental energy fluctuates throughout the day and week. They identify when they have the most focus, creativity, and decision-making capacity, and they protect those periods fiercely for their highest leverage work. They use lower energy periods for routine tasks that don't require peak performance. This approach can double or triple productivity because you're doing your most important work when you're at your cognitive best. An hour of focused work during peak energy can accomplish more than 3 hours of distracted work during low energy periods. The third principle is batching and blocking. Instead of switching between different types of activities throughout the day, Elite performers group similar activities together and complete them in focused blocks. They might have a block for creative work, a block for communication, a block for decision-making, and a block for administrative tasks. This batching approach eliminates what psychologists call switching costs, the mental energy lost when transitioning between different types of activities. Every time you switch from one type of task to another, your brain needs time to refocus and reorient. These switching costs can consume up to 25% of your productive capacity. By batching similar activities, you stay in the same mental mode and maintain deep focus for extended periods. This creates what psychologists call flow states, periods of optimal performance where you're completely absorbed in the task and producing your best work. Elite performers also master what I call attention architecture. They design their environment and systems to support sustained focus rather than constant distraction. They eliminate notifications during focused work periods, create physical spaces optimized for specific types of work, and use tools that support concentration rather than fragment it. They understand that attention is their most valuable resource, and they protect it aggressively. They don't just react to whatever demands attention. They proactively design systems that allow them to direct their attention toward their highest leverage activities. The fourth principle is outcome-based productivity. Most people measure productivity by how busy they are or how many tasks they complete. Elite performers measure productivity by the outcomes they create, the results, progress, and value generated by their activities. They regularly audit their activities to determine which ones actually contribute to their goals and which ones are just motion without progress. They eliminate activities that don't create real value, even if those activities feel productive or are expected by others. This outcome focus prevents them from falling into what I call productivity theater. Activities that look like productive work but don't actually move you toward your objectives. They would rather create one meaningful outcome than complete 10 meaningless tasks. Elite performers also understand the power of what I call time compression. Instead of thinking about how to fill available time, they think about how to accomplish objectives in less time. They ask questions like, how could I achieve this result in half the time? Or, what would have to be true for this to be 10 times faster? This compression mindset forces them to identify the essential elements of any task and eliminate everything that's not absolutely necessary. It prevents perfectionism and over-engineering while ensuring that they're focusing on what actually matters. The fifth principle is systematic saying no. Elite performers understand that every yes to one thing is a no to something else. They develop sophisticated criteria for evaluating opportunities and requests, and they say no to everything that doesn't meet their standards, regardless of how good it might seem in isolation. They create what I call decision filters, predetermined criteria that allow them to quickly evaluate whether something deserves their time and attention. These filters might include alignment with long-term goals, potential for learning and growth, financial impact, relationship-building value, or strategic importance. Having clear filters prevents them from getting distracted by shiny objects or social pressure. They can quickly evaluate opportunities and make decisions without having to analyze each one from scratch. Perhaps most importantly, elite performers understand that time mastery is not about working more hours. It's about creating more value per hour. They focus on what economists call productivity gains, systematic improvements that allow them to generate better results with the same or less effort. This might include developing better systems, acquiring new skills, building better relationships, investing in better tools, or eliminating bottlenecks that slow down their progress. They're constantly looking for ways to get more leverage from their time investment. They also practice what I call time investment thinking. Instead of just spending time on activities, they invest time in capabilities that will save time in the future. They might spend time today building a system that will save hours every week, or learning a skill that will make them more efficient permanently. This investment approach creates compound returns on time. The time invested today generates time savings that accumulate over months and years. It's the difference between trading time for results and investing time for capabilities that generate ongoing results. Chapter 12. The Wealth Mindset and Financial Intelligence. Money is not just a tool for buying things. It's a tool for buying freedom, options, and the ability to focus on what matters most without being constrained by financial limitations. The elite understand that financial intelligence is not about getting rich quick or finding secret investment strategies. It's about developing a fundamentally different relationship with money that creates sustainable wealth over time. Most people have what I call a scarcity mindset around money. They believe there's not enough to go around, that making money requires taking it away from someone else, and that wealthy people are somehow lucky or immoral. This mindset creates behaviors that keep them financially limited because they're operating from fear, restriction, and zero-sum thinking. Elite performers operate from what I call an abundance mindset. They understand that wealth is created through value creation, that money flows to people who solve problems and serve others, and that there are unlimited opportunities to create financial abundance through providing value in the marketplace. This abundance mindset changes everything about how they approach money. Instead of trying to save their way to wealth, they focus on increasing their earning capacity. Instead of competing for limited resources, they create new value that expands the total pie. Instead of hoarding money out of fear, they invest it strategically to create more opportunities. The first principle of financial intelligence is understanding the difference between assets and liabilities. Most people think they understand this distinction, but they consistently make choices that create liabilities while thinking they're building assets. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. The goal is to acquire assets and eliminate liabilities. This sounds simple, but most people do the opposite. They acquire liabilities, thinking they're assets. For example, most people consider their primary residence an asset. But if it's not generating income and requires ongoing payments for mortgage, taxes, maintenance, and insurance, it's actually a liability. An investment property that generates rental income above all expenses is an asset. Elite performers are obsessed with acquiring true assets, things that generate passive income without requiring their direct time and effort. This might include rental properties, dividend-paying stocks, business ownership, royalties, or other investments that produce cash flow. The second principle is understanding the power of compound interest and time. Albert Einstein allegedly called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world because of its ability to create exponential growth over time. Those who understand it earn it. Those who don't pay it. Most people underestimate the power of starting early and overestimate the power of contributing more later. Someone who invests $200 per month starting at age 25 will have more money at retirement than someone who invests $400 per month starting at age 35, assuming the same rate of return. Elite performers start investing as early as possible. Even if the amounts are small, they understand that time in the market is more important than timing the market. They focus on consistency and long-term growth rather than trying to find quick returns or perfect investment opportunities. The third principle is developing what I call value creation thinking. Most people think about money in terms of trading time for dollars. They work a certain number of hours and receive a paycheck. This approach limits their earning potential because there are only 24 hours in a day. Elite performers think about creating value that can be scaled, leveraged, and automated. They ask questions like, how can I create something once that generates income multiple times? Or, how can I solve a problem for many people simultaneously? This might mean creating products, building systems, developing intellectual property, or building businesses that can operate without their direct involvement. The goal is to disconnect income from hours worked and connect it to value created. The fourth principle is understanding different types of income and optimizing for the most advantageous types. Not all income is created equal from a tax perspective, risk perspective, or scalability perspective. Earned income from a job is the least advantageous because it's taxed at the highest rates, stops when you stop working, and is limited by the hours you can work. Portfolio income from investments is more advantageous because it's often taxed at lower rates and doesn't require active work. Passive income from businesses or real estate is often the most advantageous because it can be structured for tax efficiency and continues even when you're not actively working. Elite performers systematically work to transition from earned income to passive income over time. They use their earned income to acquire assets that generate passive income, gradually reducing their dependence on trading time for money. The fifth principle is what I call financial education arbitrage. Most people learn about money from people who don't have money. Broke friends, financial advisors who earn modest salaries, or general media that caters to average audiences. Elite performers learn about money from people who have successfully created significant wealth. They study the strategies, mindsets, and behaviors of self-made millionaires and billionaires. They understand that financial advice from unsuccessful people is worse than useless. It's actively harmful. They invest heavily in financial education, understanding that knowledge about money is often more valuable than money itself. They read books, attend seminars, hire coaches, and join communities where they can learn from people who have achieved the financial results they want. Elite performers also understand the psychology of money and how emotions can sabotage financial decision-making. They recognize that fear, greed, impatience, and social pressure can lead to poor financial choices that destroy wealth over time. They develop what I call emotional discipline around money. They don't make financial decisions when they're emotional. They stick to predetermined investment strategies rather than reacting to market fluctuations. They avoid lifestyle inflation and keep their fixed expenses low even as their income increases. Perhaps most importantly, Elite performers understand that building wealth is not about restricting their lifestyle or living in deprivation. It's about making strategic choices that optimize for long-term financial freedom rather than short-term consumption. They practice what I call conscious spending. They spend freely on things that align with their values and goals, while ruthlessly cutting expenses that don't add real value to their lives. They might spend significant money on education, health, or experiences while driving an older car and living in a modest home. This strategic approach to spending allows them to maximize their savings rate without feeling deprived. They understand that every dollar saved and invested compounds over time, creating exponentially more options and freedom in the future. The goal is not to accumulate money for its own sake, but to create enough financial resources that money is no longer a limiting factor in their life decisions. They want to reach what I call financial optionality, having enough resources that they can make choices based on what they want to do rather than what they need to do for money. Chapter 13. Peak Physical Performance and Energy Optimization. Your physical state directly impacts your mental performance, emotional resilience, decision-making ability, and overall effectiveness in every area of life. The elite understand that their body is not separate from their success. It's the foundation that makes everything else possible. They treat physical optimization as seriously as they treat business strategy, because they know that energy is the ultimate currency. Most people have a completely backwards relationship with their physical health. They sacrifice their energy and well-being in pursuit of success, thinking they can make up for poor physical habits through willpower and determination. This approach inevitably leads to burnout, declining performance, and ultimately less success than they could achieve with proper energy management. Elite performers understand that physical optimization is not about looking good or competing in athletic events. It's about creating the energy, focus, and resilience necessary to perform at peak levels consistently over time. They view their body as a performance machine that needs to be maintained, optimized, and upgraded regularly. The first principle of peak physical performance is understanding that energy is not unlimited. Your physical and mental energy operate on daily, weekly, and seasonal cycles. Elite performers study their own energy patterns and design their lives to work with these natural rhythms rather than against them. They identify when they naturally have the most energy and schedule their most important work during these periods. They understand when they need recovery and build rest periods into their schedule before they become exhausted. They treat energy management as seriously as they treat time management because depleted energy makes time worthless. This approach prevents the boom and bust cycles that destroy most people's consistency. Instead of pushing until they burn out and then recovering, they maintain sustainable energy levels that allow for consistent high performance over extended periods. The second principle is optimizing the foundational elements that determine energy levels: sleep, nutrition, hydration, and movement. Most people treat these as luxuries or afterthoughts, only paying attention to them when problems arise. Elite performers treat them as non-negotiable foundations that everything else depends on. Sleep is perhaps the most critical foundation because it affects every aspect of physical and mental performance. Elite performers prioritize sleep quality and quantity above almost everything else. They understand that one night of poor sleep can reduce cognitive performance by 25%, impair decision-making, increase emotional reactivity, and weaken immune function. They create sleep environments optimized for recovery. Dark, cool, quiet rooms with comfortable bedding and minimal distractions. They follow consistent sleep schedules that allow for 7 to 9 hours of high-quality sleep. They avoid caffeine, alcohol, and electronic screens in the hours before bedtime because these interfere with sleep quality. Nutrition is the second critical foundation. Elite performers understand that food is fuel for performance, not just pleasure or convenience. They eat to optimize energy levels, cognitive function, and long-term health rather than just satisfying immediate cravings. This doesn't mean restrictive dieting or eliminating all enjoyable foods. It means making conscious choices about what to eat based on how different foods affect their energy and performance. They notice how different foods make them feel and adjust their nutrition accordingly. They typically focus on whole foods that provide steady energy rather than processed foods that create energy spikes and crashes. They eat regularly to maintain stable blood sugar levels. They stay hydrated because even mild dehydration can significantly impair cognitive and physical performance. The third principle is understanding the relationship between physical fitness and mental performance. Exercise is not just about physical health. It's one of the most powerful tools for optimizing brain function, emotional regulation, and stress resilience. Regular exercise increases blood flow to the brain, stimulates the production of growth factors that support neural health, improves mood through neurotransmitter regulation, and builds stress resilience through controlled exposure to physical stress. These benefits translate directly into better decision-making, increased focus, improved emotional stability, and greater overall effectiveness. Elite performers don't exercise just to look good. They exercise to think better. They understand that physical fitness is mental fitness. They prioritize consistency over intensity. Choosing exercise routines they can maintain long-term rather than extreme programs that lead to burnout or injury. They also understand that different types of exercise provide different benefits. Cardiovascular exercise improves energy and endurance. Strength training builds resilience and confidence. Flexibility work reduces injury risk and improves recovery. They design exercise programs that address all these areas rather than focusing exclusively on one type of training. The fourth principle is stress management and recovery optimization. Elite performers understand that stress is not inherently bad. It's necessary for growth and adaptation. The problem is chronic stress without adequate recovery, which leads to decreased performance and eventual breakdown. They practice what I call stress cycling, alternating between periods of high stress and high recovery. They push hard when it's time to push and recover completely when it's time to recover. They don't try to maintain maximum intensity constantly because that leads to diminishing returns and eventual burnout. They also develop sophisticated stress management techniques, meditation, breathing exercises, massage, time in nature, social connection, and other practices that activate the parasympathetic nervous system and promote recovery. They treat stress management as a skill to be developed, rather than a luxury to be enjoyed when convenient. The fifth principle is what I call performance stack optimization. Elite performers understand that small improvements in multiple areas compound to create significant overall performance gains. They systematically optimize every element that affects their physical and mental state. This might include morning routines that prepare them for peak performance, evening routines that optimize recovery, supplement protocols that support energy and cognitive function, environmental modifications that reduce stress and improve focus, and technology tools that track and optimize various performance metrics. They approach optimization scientifically, making one change at a time and measuring the impact before moving to the next change. They understand that what works for others might not work for them, so they experiment systematically to find their optimal protocols. Perhaps most importantly, elite performers understand that physical optimization is not about perfection. It's about creating sustainable systems that support high performance over time. They focus on consistency rather than intensity, progress rather than perfection, and long-term sustainability rather than short-term gains. They build physical optimization into their identity rather than treating it as a separate goal. They don't exercise because they have to. They exercise because they're the type of person who prioritizes their health and energy. This identity-based approach creates consistency that willpower-based approaches cannot match. The goal is not to become a professional athlete or fitness model. It's to create the physical foundation necessary to perform at elite levels in whatever field matters most to you. Physical optimization is not an end in itself. It's a means to everything else you want to achieve. Chapter 14: Leadership, Influence, and Legacy Building. True leadership is not about having authority over others. It's about having the ability to influence outcomes, inspire action, and create value that extends beyond your direct efforts. The elite understand that as they advance in their careers and achieve greater success, their ability to work through others becomes more important than their ability to do things themselves. Most people think leadership is something that happens automatically when you reach a certain position or level of success. They believe that authority creates influence and that people will follow them simply because they have a title or formal power. This approach fails because real leadership is about earning influence through value creation, not demanding compliance through positional authority. Elite performers understand that leadership is a skill that must be developed intentionally, regardless of their formal position. They focus on building what I call earned influence, the ability to inspire others to take action because they want to, not because they have to. The first principle of elite leadership is understanding that leadership is fundamentally about serving others rather than being served by others. Most people pursue leadership positions because they want the perks, status, and power that come with authority. This self-focused approach creates leaders who are more concerned with what they can get than what they can give. Elite leaders understand that their primary role is to make others more successful. They measure their success by the success of their team, organization, or community. They ask questions like, how can I help others achieve their goals? And what can I do to make everyone around me more effective? This service orientation creates what psychologists call transformational leadership. Leadership that elevates others and creates positive change. When people feel that their leader genuinely cares about their success and development, they're naturally motivated to perform at higher levels and contribute more to shared objectives. The second principle is developing what I call vision, clarity, and communication. Elite leaders don't just have goals. They have compelling visions of the future that inspire others to take action. They can articulate not just what needs to be done, but why it matters and how it will create value for everyone involved. They understand that people are motivated more by purpose than by process. Simply telling someone what to do rarely creates enthusiastic compliance. Helping them understand how their contribution fits into a larger mission that matters creates intrinsic motivation that far exceeds external pressure. Elite leaders also understand that vision must be communicated consistently and repeatedly through multiple channels. They don't just share their vision once and assume everyone understands it. They find ways to reinforce the vision through stories, examples, decisions, and recognition that demonstrate what they value and why it matters. The third principle is what I call competence-based credibility. Elite leaders understand that their ability to influence others depends heavily on their perceived competence and track record of results. People follow leaders they believe can help them achieve objectives they couldn't achieve alone. This means elite leaders are constantly developing their own capabilities while also developing the capabilities of others. They stay current with industry trends, invest in learning new skills, and maintain high personal performance standards. They lead by example rather than just by instruction. They also understand the importance of admitting what they don't know and surrounding themselves with people who complement their weaknesses. Authentic competence includes knowing your limitations and building systems that compensate for them. The fourth principle is developing emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills. Elite leaders understand that technical skills might get you promoted to leadership positions, but people skills determine your effectiveness once you're there. They invest heavily in understanding human psychology, motivation, communication, and relationship building. They learn to read social dynamics, manage conflict constructively, give feedback effectively, and create psychological safety that allows others to perform at their best. They also develop what I call adaptive communication, the ability to adjust their communication style based on the needs, preferences, and personalities of different team members. They understand that effective leadership requires meeting people where they are, rather than expecting everyone to adapt to their preferred style. The fifth principle is what I call systems thinking for leadership. Elite leaders don't just manage individual people or tasks. They design systems and cultures that produce consistently good results, regardless of individual personalities or circumstances. They understand that sustainable leadership requires building capabilities and processes that don't depend entirely on their personal involvement. They create systems for decision-making, communication, problem-solving, and performance management that allow their organization to function effectively even when they're not directly involved. This systems approach allows them to scale their influence beyond their direct capacity. Instead of being the bottleneck that everything flows through, they become the architect of systems that multiply their impact through others. Elite leaders also understand the importance of developing other leaders rather than just managing followers. They actively mentor, coach, and develop people who can eventually take on leadership responsibilities themselves. They measure their success partly by how many other successful leaders they've developed. The sixth principle is what I call legacy thinking. Elite leaders don't just focus on immediate results. They think about the long-term impact of their decisions and actions. They ask questions like, what kind of organization or community am I building? And what will be the lasting impact of my leadership? This long-term perspective influences how they make decisions, treat people, and allocate resources. They're willing to make short-term sacrifices for long-term benefits. They prioritize building sustainable capabilities over achieving quick wins that might create long-term problems. They also understand that their legacy is not just about what they accomplish personally, but about what they enable others to accomplish. The most successful leaders are often remembered more for the people they developed and the positive changes they created than for their individual achievements. Perhaps most importantly, elite leaders understand that influence is not about manipulating others to do what you want. It's about aligning individual motivations with collective objectives so that everyone benefits from working together toward shared goals. They create what I call alignment of interests. Situations where people are naturally motivated to contribute to shared success because it also serves their individual interests. This creates sustainable motivation that doesn't depend on constant supervision or external pressure. The ultimate goal of elite leadership is not just to achieve objectives, but to create positive change that extends beyond your direct involvement. It's about building capabilities, developing people, and creating value that continues to generate benefits long after your direct leadership ends. Chapter 15. Staying ahead. The long-term mastery mindset. Getting ahead of 99% of people is not a destination. It's an ongoing process that requires continuous evolution, adaptation, and growth. The elite understand that maintaining their position at the top requires different strategies than reaching the top initially. They know that success creates new challenges and that what got them to their current level won't necessarily keep them there. Most people who achieve some level of success make a fatal mistake. They stop doing the things that made them successful in the first place. They get comfortable, complacent, and conservative. They shift from a growth mindset to a maintenance mindset. They start playing not to lose instead of playing to win. Elite performers understand that the moment you stop growing, you start declining. In today's rapidly changing world, standing still is equivalent to moving backward. The skills that made you valuable yesterday may be irrelevant tomorrow. The strategies that worked in the past may not work in the future. This is why the elite adopt what I call a perpetual student mindset. They never stop learning, growing, and adapting. They treat every experience as an opportunity to gain new insights and develop new capabilities. They remain curious, humble, and open to new information, regardless of how successful they've become. The first principle of long-term mastery is understanding that adaptation beats optimization. Most people try to perfect their existing approach rather than adapting to changing circumstances. They become incredibly good at outdated methods instead of developing new capabilities for emerging opportunities. Elite performers are constantly scanning their environment for changes that might affect their industry, market, or field. They identify trends early and position themselves to benefit from change rather than being disrupted by it. They view change as opportunity rather than threat. This requires what I call strategic paranoia, constantly questioning whether your current approach will continue to be effective and looking for signs that it might need to change. They ask questions like, what could make my current skills irrelevant? And what new capabilities will be valuable in the future? The second principle is developing what I call reinvention capability. Elite performers don't just adapt to change. They proactively reinvent themselves before change forces them to. They periodically step back and ask, if I were starting over today, what would I do differently? This might mean developing new skills, entering new markets, building new relationships, or completely changing their approach to value creation. They're willing to abandon methods that have worked in the past if better methods become available. This reinvention capability requires overcoming what psychologists call commitment bias, the tendency to stick with decisions and approaches simply because you've invested time and energy in them. Elite performers understand that past investment is irrelevant to future decisions. They're willing to change course when circumstances change. The third principle is what I call compound advantage building. Elite performers understand that small advantages compound over time to create insurmountable leads. They're constantly looking for ways to build advantages that become stronger over time rather than weaker. This might include building skills that become more valuable with experience, creating networks that become more powerful as they grow, developing systems that become more efficient through optimization, or building reputation that opens more opportunities over time. They focus on advantages that are difficult to replicate and that create positive feedback loops. The more successful they become, the more opportunities they receive. The more opportunities they receive, the more successful they become. The fourth principle is understanding the importance of what I call meta skills, capabilities that enhance your ability to develop other capabilities. These are skills like learning how to learn, thinking how to think, and adapting how to adapt. Elite performers invest heavily in developing meta skills because they provide leverage across all other areas. Someone who can learn faster will accumulate knowledge and skills faster. Someone who can think more clearly will make better decisions. Someone who can adapt more quickly will thrive in changing environments. These meta skills become more valuable over time because they compound. Every improvement in your learning ability improves your ability to develop all other skills. Every improvement in your thinking improves your decision-making across all areas of life. The fifth principle is what I call anti-fragile positioning. Instead of just trying to survive challenges and setbacks, elite performers position themselves to benefit from volatility and uncertainty. They build systems and capabilities that get stronger under stress rather than weaker. This might mean developing multiple income streams so that problems in one area don't affect others, building skills that become more valuable during difficult times, or creating flexible systems that can adapt quickly to changing circumstances. They understand that uncertainty is not something to be avoided. It's something to be leveraged. While others are paralyzed by uncertainty, they're creating opportunities from the chaos. The sixth principle is legacy thinking and impact multiplication. Elite performers understand that the ultimate measure of success is not just what you achieve personally, but what you enable others to achieve. They think about how to multiply their impact through others. This might mean developing other leaders, creating systems that outlive their direct involvement, building organizations that continue to create value, or sharing knowledge that helps others achieve similar success. They understand that the most sustainable success comes from creating value that extends beyond their personal efforts. They build platforms, develop people, and create positive change that continues to generate benefits long after their direct involvement ends. Perhaps most importantly, elite performers understand that staying ahead requires maintaining what I call day one thinking. They approach each day as if they're starting fresh, with unlimited possibilities and no guarantees based on past success. They stay hungry, humble, and focused on continuous improvement rather than resting on their accomplishments. They understand that yesterday's success doesn't guarantee tomorrow's relevance. They also maintain what I call beginner's mind, the ability to approach familiar situations with fresh perspective and openness to new possibilities. They don't let expertise become arrogance or knowledge become dogma. The goal is not just to reach the top 1%, but to stay there consistently over time while continuing to grow and contribute value to others. This requires a fundamentally different approach than most people take to success, one focused on continuous evolution rather than reaching a destination. The elite understand that true mastery is not about achieving perfection. It's about developing the capability to continue growing, adapting, and contributing value regardless of changing circumstances. They build lives and careers that are not just successful, but sustainable and meaningful over the long term. Your journey to getting ahead of 99% of people doesn't end when you reach certain milestones. It begins again each day with the choice to continue growing, contributing, and becoming the person capable of creating extraordinary results. The principles in this guide are not just strategies for getting ahead. They're frameworks for staying ahead and making a lasting impact that extends far beyond your individual success.